Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Resident Alien. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I thought it was kind of a nice intro where we kind of learned more about Harry, well, the real Harry, and Isabel. Obviously, we learned kind of about their relationship, how they met 5 years ago and everything. It's actually interesting because it seems like Harry was actually already divorced because it already seemed like he made that joke to all those other people. It's like, oh yeah, it's very easy to work on other people's hearts as long as it's not his own. But it was actually this sweet thing we saw between Isabel and Harry, and it was like, oh, which actually makes you a little sad because you're like, oh, her husband's actually dead and she doesn't know that because obviously she thinks this is Harry. Which I love that Harry left to deal with the kid situation, came back. She's like, why'd you leave after I came here? It's like, and he's like, why are you still here? And she's trying to repair their relationship because at first she's like talking about I think it was later on, or maybe it was the same moment, but it was a whole thing of it was in that moment where it's like Harry blew off them getting a divorce. I guess maybe he didn't want to face it. Because he's been avoiding her for months. Because I was like, well, to be fair, Harry's been dead for 4 months, so that could be specifically. She said 4 months in the sense of like several months, but not necessarily the 4 months. So it could have been he was already avoiding her because he didn't want to get divorced, or it could just simply because I missed a meeting because he died and got replaced by an alien. But she's like, yeah, like I'm tired of this like turmoil, this roller coaster, and he signs a paper. And he's like, yep, done. And she's like, oh, that was so easy for you. And she's so pissed because he was like, yeah, you can go stay at this motel. And she calls him and gets pissed at him, sleeps in his room, but then cuddles up to him. He's like, honestly, this isn't too bad, so I can sleep. And then she proceeds to snore, and he's like, shit. Which I like that roller coaster of everything, because at first it's like, it also shows you what kind of person she is, because it's like, oh, you have this locked door, huh? Well, I'm gonna break into it. Oh, you have this locked freezer. I'm gonna break into it, because I guess it's like, we're married and I'm not gonna let you keep any secrets from me. Granted, she finds Sahara's shop and ends up thinking like, oh, like it smells like, it's like that cheating bastard. It's like, don't worry, that doesn't belong to the woman he's cheating on you with. It's the little girl that snuck into his house to prove that he was an alien, that he was planning on killing her and her friend Max, So yeah, it's much better. It's way better than you think it is of him cheating on. Come on. Which I love that led to her being at the doctor's office blowing up in front of him. And they brought up the whole thing of, wait, Harry, you told me your wife was dead. It's like, oh, am I dead, Harry? Oh, I guess I'm just a ghost. And I start throwing stuff everywhere. And it's just like, and once again, Harry's just kind of like not understanding the circumstances, like, which I also loved his back and forth with Darcy, because Darcy's like, yeah, I'm just not into you. And he's like, why? Because you're not smart. And she's like, wait, what did you say? He was like, crap, women on this planet don't like being, I guess like on his planet he was kind of insinuating like men talk shit to women, and it's kind of a thing. So I guess on his planet, like, women like negging. Obviously they don't like it on Earth, but I guess he was like, oh no, I shouldn't have said that, I'm so sorry. I even love him being like, can I get some of your coffee? She's like, this coffee I got specifically for myself and you didn't ask for any? He was like, yes. She's like, no. And I love that at the end he walked away with it anyway, and she's like, asshole, snatching her coffee like that. But it is kind of sad that her and Darcy kind of like, oh, they're kind of both going through their love issues and they were drinking. I love the whole conversation about like, oh, what if we were talking about the same man? And also like, oh, what if there was two of them? And it's like, ha ha ha, there technically is, but one of them's dead. Ha ha ha. Which is interesting because technically Darcy fell for alien Harry, whereas Isabel fell for the real Harry. But sadly, like, we start seeing some rekindling of flames to a certain extent between Isabel. I'm sure that kind of makes Darcy kick herself a little bit more, because it's like, damn it, I helped you get closer to the guy that I'm trying to get closer to. But I even love Harry being like, when it was all said, she's like, well, dinner's over, so what's next? He's like, well, scrub the dishes when you leave. I was like, that's so damn... I mean, because even that being the thing, like, Darcy and Isabel kind of liked, it's like he is a lot more blunt. She doesn't like that. Well, Darcy at the very least kind of appreciates it, rather than him being someone who beats around the bush. But it is kind of sad that she's like, oh, well, that sucks. Because you're like, oh, like, Darcy and Harry could be interesting. But Isabel did talk to Darcy about kind of like, oh, like, you're just kind of running away. It's like, the reason why you broke up with this dude, it's not necessarily because anything's wrong with him, because even all the things that is kind of wrong with him, you like about him. but you're just, and it comes back to it, and that becomes the theme of the episode to a certain extent. It's like, you just don't like how that person makes you feel on the inside. Because I think for Darcy, it's just because it's a lot easier, because I think it scares her, because it's like, oh, like, I'm sure in Darcy's mind, she looks at herself as a bit of a train wreck. And from the outside, it could appear that way. But it's like, I think Darcy's just very self-destructive. Like, she's in a low place, and I think she's just sinking lower and lower. Like, she's internalizing a lot of stuff. And I think in her mind, it's probably like, she probably doesn't think like, oh, no, like, nothing good. Like, I can probably deserve it. Because, like, I think she probably figures in her mind, like, anything good in her life, she'll break. Because anything good in her life never works out. Because even she's joking about, like, oh yeah, like, I'm trying to find, like, my next pre-divorce. It's like, oh, get in a relationship just so it can lead to divorce. Just because, which I can get behind, in the sense of, like, I'm one of those people. I've been like that in relationships where I go into a relationship assuming that things are going to end terribly. I've been that person in the past. I was younger. I was in high school writing poems about that, and my girlfriend at the time was like, wait, are you writing this poem about me? Like, about us splitting up and stuff like that? I was that dude. Still kind of am to a certain extent. So I understand kind of, at least, that could just be me projecting how I've been in the past. And like I said, to a certain extent, still am. Maybe I'm just kind of projecting that on Darcy. But I think I find a kindred, I think I connect to the character in that regard. Like I said, just because I think ever since like her leg injury and like her dreams of being, the Olympian, I think it just, all that kind of, I think it was just, that was like a cascade of like, after that, just everything kind of fell back into place. It fell backwards because now she's back in Patience, Colorado. It's just kind of like, I think she's kind of, to a certain extent, I think she's kind of given up and she's kind of lost a little hope. So I think Harry kind of inspires that a little bit. And I think for her, it's like, I don't want to get my hopes up just to have them dash, what sadly they ended up being. But what I thought was so fascinating was like when Harry's just walking away, Isabel busts into a song, and I was like, does that like resonate on some like frequency that got him, or is it just like the loveliness of her voice and the words that seduced him? But then they proceed to have sex, and he's like, oh my God, I don't know what we're doing. She's like, we're reconnecting, and lo and behold, they do their thing. But she's like, oh, you still kept that painting. I knew you loved me. We're going to be together forever. And I love as she cuddles up to him, his eyes shoot up, and he's like, shit. The whole point was to get rid of you. Now you're sticking around forever. Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. But even at the end, I love it where he's like, I just want to sleep. So he's planning on killing her, but he's like, she can live for one more day, geez. Which is actually interesting. I wasn't expecting that. Granted, you still have to deal with the fact is you've got her dead husband in the freezer. You got to make sure, especially because you can't keep any secrets from her, because she went through the trouble of not only breaking, like I said, the basement door, but also the freezer door. So you got to be careful about that. So I think that's going to be well, because his real wife is dead, so it could be a situation where like he hasn't felt like this in a long time. So maybe that could be good. This could be something good for Harry in the long run. It's going to be interesting. Like, if anything, I honestly thought he'd end up with Asta. It doesn't mean it still won't end up that way, but that's immediately what I immediately thought that was going to be the case. But, we'll have to wait and see how things with Isabel play out. I think that, because what was also interesting, too, was that they were like, she was like, yeah, some men were looking for you. So I'm like, is that why Harry came here? Because does he owe a lot of people money or something like that? So is he running, like, is Harry going to have to worry about some people popping up of being like, oh, hey, where's our money, bro? Or could those be the government officials who knew that, like, because I was about to say, like, they don't know it's specifically Harry, so it can't be the government people. It has, well, not unless it is. Not unless they were looking for Harry because they needed a trusted doctor in his field to look into this alien stuff or something. Maybe, but I think it's probably more so like he owes some people some money, so that's probably more trouble that's going to find its way to town for Harry. We'll see how that, like I said, I'm speculating at this point. It was just an interesting bit of dialogue of like, oh, those men who came to the door looking for you. I'm like, oh, what was that about? So maybe we'll get answers to that soon enough. Another complicated angle to this episode is the whole Asta and Jay thing, where it's just kind of like, obviously, Jay's like, yeah, my mom went, thank you and everything, so she invited you over for dinner. Asta's like, oh, kind of nervous about it. You also had Sam's wife dropping off, like, his files and stuff like that, which I think is so interesting. I think that speaks volume, and I think that's why they're kind of throwing her at least kind of as a suspect. Granted, she has an alibi, but also it's the thing of, he was poisoned. Like, who knows how long, like, it can take a while for poison. I mean, I guess for it to enter your bloodstream, like we don't know how far in advance he was poisoned. Was it enough that it could slowly kill him until he got to the office, or what? But to be fair, for her, it's like I need it to be ruled a suicide. It needs to be ruled a murder. It's like I hope that at the end of the day, Harry, you end up doing the right thing, even offering him a haircut and stuff. So. She's probably not the murderer, but she is probably a situation of, I need that money. So it's probably going to make her look like a suspect, but, because the whole point was, like, they cleared her earlier in the season by saying she had an alibi, if I remember correctly. But it seems a little suspicious, but for her to be like, I want it to, well, it could still, well, because I guess she could still, like, have it framed, murder him, hoping to get the money and hoping to get away with the murder, because that could also be why she doesn't want it to be a suicide. So, well, we'll see. That could be a clear-cut thing, or that might be a little bit more suspicious. We'll see. But circling back to it, Asta's talking about the fact is, like, how she should handle the Jay thing. You have Harry being like, just tell her the truth, but it's like, I can't, she's got a good life, a good family, like, who am I to just interject out of my own selfishness? It's like, well, you can always fire her, but which Harry was like, let me do it, I'll be the one to fire her. Sadly, Jay ends up looking through Sam's files and ends up finding out about everything, and it's like, not only does she find out, oh, Asta, you're my mom, and you've been lying to me this entire time, and you gave me up, but also who her dad, so she probably knows about Jimmy and Asta, in the sense of, like, their relationship, how much of an abusive piece of shit he is. So that she's like, yeah, I kind of lucked out on that one, didn't I? So I think she knows about that. And before Asta can even really explain, Jay walks away. So Asta and Harry kind of had that conversation about lying. I thought was interesting. He's like, humans lie, and it's like, why do humans do that? It's like, in a sense, it is to kind of protect themselves, because it's kind of their way of kind of like not. I think a lot, and my personal thing is, I feel like humans lie out of fear, because we don't want things to turn sour. We want things to kind of be okay, because I think we're just afraid that they won't be if we tell the truth. But there's a Jimmy and Austin thing, which I love, that Harry is like, hey, we met briefly, and Jimmy's like, are you good with me? He's like, no, of course not. And then on the inside, chicken ass bitch. I was like, where did that come from? But I also love that they're in the restaurant talking, and then Harry's over there. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, yeah. He's like, what is this, your boyfriend now? Were you her bodyguard? More like ninja. I was like, I love that, because they even love later on, she's like, ignore him. He's in this whole, like, reading books about monks and ninjas right now. But it is super sweet that when it was all said and done, Harry was still looking out for, because he knows who Jimmy is. I was like, whoa, you're not going to lay a hand on Asta while I'm around. It's like, a whole anti-human thing he's got. Like, he's warmed up. Like, even from the beginning, he cared about Asta. Maybe it's just spending all this time as a human. Maybe he adopted a lot. Well, because I think maybe that's the irony behind it, because Harry had heart issues in the sense of, like, hey, when it comes to relationships, he wasn't really good at them, but Harry's very good at, like obviously his heart is big, that he cares about people even though he's an alien, So, I mean, granted, we don't know what Harry was like on this planet. Maybe he cared about a lot of people. Well, because he said the whole thing about his people is, like, they don't care about family. Like, if your parents die, whatever, who cares? You move on. It's not that big of a deal. So it might just be becoming Harry and becoming a human, becoming so much more like a human, because obviously he's adapted a lot of their need for sleep and need to eat and stuff. Sure, but maybe he adopted Harry's heart in that regard as well, and becoming more and more human, or maybe just naturally by the process of being around so many people, they're having an impact on him. Like, other people's hearts have touched his, and kind of like a Grinch situation, in his heart is growing big. I'm sure there is probably a Grinch parallel you can make to him, green and everything, But yeah, but obviously Jimmy's reaction to the whole thing, it's interesting, his perspective on it. It's like, it's kind of, he's calling Asta out, being like, oh, you're messed up because you should have never gotten involved in her life and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like, Dan's like, I'll kind of ignore him. It's best that she does know. But it's like, I say, she's like, you don't have to get involved. Like, I don't want to. She's like, but he's like, the moment your mom left, I had a feeling she wasn't coming back. So I tucked you in extra tight and promised, you that everything was going to be okay. So despite everything, like, obviously Dan's going to be there for her no matter how this Jay situation plays out, because they're family, But also, hey, where's Harry? And he's just over there. He's like, ninja. I love that he's like really diving deep into that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this whole Jay and Asta thing plays out, because she's avoiding Asta in particular, but she does stop by, the restaurant, and it's like, she's like, only got enough for coffee. And he's like, family doesn't pay here. And I was like, okay, that's really heartwarming and sweet. So I'm very interested to see kind of where that family situation goes going forward. But another angle to this whole thing is the whole Max and Sahar situation, because it's like, okay, so what happened? Max wakes up in his closet, and it's like, okay, he's like, yeah, I guess I must have fallen asleep. It turns out Sahar doesn't remember. Either it's because she touched the apple and it zapped something in her brain. Granted, we don't know what else that could have done to her, but it seems like she doesn't remember. Like, I guess it took away, because she's like, I remember riding the bikes, but not breaking into Harry's place. So I think that chunk of her memory, I think either it chunked away like some of it, because that's interesting. I guess maybe because the way Max's mind is, because the fact is he has that genetic thing that lets him see what Harry really is. Maybe the technology didn't have the same effect it has, because Sahar can't see him because she doesn't have the genetic thing that lets her do that. So maybe because Max does on some level, it prevented him from losing his memory on that regard. I don't know. But obviously he's bringing it up to his parents like, no, like, he's an alien. I know he is. We broke into his place. And it's like, you did what? So that's interesting. But when it came to the confrontation with Harry had set it up to be like, trying to make it, which I love him being like, I don't accept his apology. It's like, he hasn't apologized yet. Oh, it's like, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's like, okay, I'm really sorry. I don't accept this apology. You have to. Why? And it's like, because those are the rules. I love that that's Ben's reasoning. I think that's kind of showcasing that he is very childlike. To be fair, they might, because he's married, but they have history. I was about to say that. I mean, that might be another angle to the whole Darcy and Ben thing, too. It's like, because it's probably like, for her, it's like, Ben, like I said, Ben, I think I brought it up last episode. Ben probably reminds her of a time when everything was better, when maybe she had a better mental image of herself, and, she probably the way she perceives herself, and then the way she thinks people perceive her. Like, I think that was all, and it, something gonna be considered. So I don't know if that's going to turn anything going forward, because things didn't work out with Ben, things didn't work out with Harry. So we'll see. Like I said, I kind of want there to be a Darcy and Harry thing, but like I said, I'm curious to see where the Isabel and Harry thing goes. But what I really like though is obviously the way Harry set that up is like all these different faces, because Max can't see what Harry looks like as Harry. He can only see the alien form. So when it's like, oh, what do I look like? It's like he picked a picture of Sam Neill. It's like, no, this isn't Sam. Who did he say it was? I'm blanking on who he said it was, but it's like, no, this is Sam Neill, not who you said. He said it was some other actor, and it's like, no, honey, this is Sam Neill. I love that whole bit. Which I guess that's supposed to showcase like Ben, because some people are just very bad at recognizing actors, like associating names with faces. But obviously Harry's trying to twist this to be like, oh, like he has all, like when he looks at people's faces, he sees scary monsters. That is kind of making it seem like a mental disease. Because I love he was like, Asta taught me that you can use love as a weapon. It's like, that's not what you were supposed to pull from that. But he used it as an opportunity to strike back against Max, and is trying to get them to send him to a special school in Georgia. I even love the whole thing of like, yeah, because of your hair, because of your skull, I can tell that, a receding hairline. I'm like, oh, that's messed up. Even later on, she's super self-conscious about it. She's like, do you think I'm losing hair? And he's like, what? Ben's like, what? No. She's like, yeah, but it just, and, it's like, and Harry even leaned into it later on, before being like, oh, last thing you want is him to be sick and also bald. Being bald's not good. I was like, oh, wow. But Sahar, it's like, no, you're not going to get, sent to that school. I found a way around this. And so they have a sit down with Harry, and I love it because like Harry wants to seem like he's such an intelligent alien, but it's a situation of he's on the same level as a kid on figure, like, it's like, well, you're not going to because like the childlike logic that they used against him, and he got defeated by it, because it's like, well, if you spread his ashes in the ocean, I'm gonna go in there and spit on his ashes. But haha, we tricked you. He was in your pocket the entire time. So the fact is that when you spit in the ocean trying to spit on him, he's actually been in your pocket the entire time. So he's laughing at you. It's like, what kind of logic is that? But it beats Harry because he doesn't understand human logic. So I love that. So it's like human kid logic beats him, and he's like, damn. But I also love this Mister because he spits on Max, and he's like, that wasn't normal human behavior. So Sahara's like, all right, we'll do this whole situation. It's a truce. He won't expose you as an alien. We'll stop talking about you as being an alien, and you will leave him alone. And he's like, but I can still try and kill him, right? It's like, no, not killing him is against the truce. That's the whole point. Because I also love that it's like, if you don't, we're going to hold our breath. And he's like, well, fine. I love the whole thing of, it's more air for me. See, I'm loving it. And it's like, what are you doing? All right, fine, stop. It's like, they wouldn't have been able to hold their breaths forever. But I love, once again, the child logic beat him. So it's like, all right. But it's like, well, why can I see you? And it's like, do you know about multidimensional? Do you know a lot about multidimensional travel? And you have Maximum like very, and it's like, well, because of that, there's a genetic thing that lets you see through dimensions, so you're able to see through our molecular construction. So it's like, okay, and then they proceed to have like this thing about, and he's like, so why do humans fold pizza? And it's like, oh, Max is like, well, because of this. It's like, because it needs to be folded. It's just engineering. It's like, do aliens poop? Yes, everybody poops. And just like the laughing, and it's like, this is kind of what I got that little element last episode where like Harry was like, oh, he thinks I'm pretty cool. Well, I am a pretty cool alien. And it's like, genuinely they've hit it off. So it's like, that's pretty neat. So I guess Max might not, once again, when the government officials show up, maybe Max won't turn on him, because it's like a situation of like, well, I won't bring him up and I get to stay home and I won't seem like the crazy kid anymore. So everything worked out. But I'm like, I like that, because also for Harry, like, there's someone that knows him for him, because even Harry was like, he realizes like he never hated Max. It was just, I didn't like the way he made me feel, because it's kind of like, it made me kind of, how I kind of, it was implying like he hated himself, and I was like, that's so fascinating. But it's like, he also had someone he can confide into and talk to about like, okay, how do I become a normal human being? Like, how, like, so there's a little pro quo type of situation going on there, but it's also like, yeah, like no one else knows his secret, so he can at least confide in Max, so it kind of works out in that regard. So I'm interested to see where that dynamic goes. Another really interesting thing we learned in this episode too is kind of, I think we got a better understanding of why Mike's the way he is. Side note, his dad is played by the actor who plays Pop on Riverdale, so I thought that was interesting because Pop just retired in Riverdale like last episode. Or was it the episode before last? I think it was the episode before last, if I remember correctly. Regardless, I just thought that was so interesting because I was like, oh, hey! Because obviously it's on the same night too. So I was like, oh. But obviously it seems like his dad kind of shits on him a little bit, and it seems like that's why Mike is kind of like the way he is. Why it seems like he kind of like... He's very... What's the word I'm looking for? He overcompensates is what I was trying to think of. I think that behavior comes about because of the way his dad, because like we saw him kind of stumbling a little bit because he's so in charge everywhere else in his life, at least from what we've seen, and so he kind of fumbles and turns into like, I think that little boy again in front of his dad, and then he kind of spills the water. He's like, damn, he's like, oh, come on, and they trust you with the gun, so it's like, I think that's where his overcompensation stems from. But obviously, like, he's trying to figure out this murder thing, because at first he was like, I was excited for there to be a serial killer because it would have been a bigger case. It would have made more, because, his dad was like, oh, and here we go, you blaming me why you got transferred here. But it's like, we both know, like, so we didn't really get into it, but like, I'm curious, what is the reason Mike is here? Also kind of, still making Liv feel small again, because he was like, cause when they went to see Max, he's like, oh, went through the trouble of getting all that snow or that ice off my car. So he's like, actually, that was me. I'm the one that did all that while you like sat there and finished your coffee. But his reasoning is just he wants there to be a bigger case so he can show off. He wants, I think, prove himself as well as his dad wrong about who he is. So I thought that was interesting. Luckily, when the files come back, well, the autopsy report comes back later on, it turns out like, oh, Sam was in fact poisoned. He was murdered. So, which Mike got a little too damn excited about. He's like, yeah, we got a murder. And everyone's looking at him like, what the hell is your problem, bro? He's like, okay, back to work, deputy. She's like, yeah. He's like, good, get to it. So it's going to be interesting. Once again, like, my money at first was on Darcy, but now I'm leaning maybe Sam's wife, because she seems suspicious. But I mean, I guess it could. I think with the way they're setting this up to be, I think it's going to be a real twist and reveal when it's like. I think there's going to be a lot of red herrings because I mean, to be fair, we haven't really dived into the case. It's just more about Harry fitting in and all this other drama around. But obviously, Mike and Liv's storyline is more circulating around that. Obviously, like Liv's investigation, because she put that doorknob from last episode as evidence. Obviously the foot thing, like obviously all of that is connected to alien Harry as well as real Harry, but obviously that's unrelated to Sam's murder. But I mean, well, because I was about to say, I don't think it's a government official, because once again they wouldn't know to like. And that the whole poisoning Sam thing, poison is a very personal crime. So that's why it has to be someone in town, someone we met. So it's going to be interesting to see how ultimately this all plays out. I'm curious to see where everything ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.